resources so that you can come up your business. You have to struggle down here. So unless we have equal distribution of resources, and unless the rich are willing to share with the poor, corruption will always be there.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, please. Please pass it. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. J'étais dans la salle à côté. Je me nomme Kemayou Claude. Je suis sénateur.
On ne peut pas traduire ici, s'il vous plaît. Il n'y a pas. On ne peut pas traduire ici. S'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup. C'est désolé. Oh, is there anybody that can translate here? There's no, we don't have, you know. Oh, madame. Oui, s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît, il faut faire vite. Hein?
Oui.
Je vais essayer de faire mon possible.
Voilà, je disais donc que je suis Kemayou Claude.
I'm Kemayou Claude.
Je suis sénateur au Cameroun.
I'm senator from Cameroon.
Et je tenais à remercier
I want to thank
l'Union interparlementaire
the
de s'être pour la première fois intéressée au Parlement et à la Chambre haute où je suis sénateur.
Okay. That he wanted to thank the union. Vous pouvez répéter?
Union interparlementaire.
The inter-union parliament, the inter-union parliamentary.
De nous avoir invités à cette haute manifestation.
Okay, for inviting them in this session.
Ma préoccupation, puisqu'il s'agit de partenariat entre tous les intervenants.
My preoccupation is about partnership with all stakeholders.
De tous les partenaires au développement.
For the all stakeholders in development.
C'est de savoir,
is to know,
comme nous avons connu une première génération de partenariat.
As we have assisted to the first wave of partnership,
qui consistait en privatisation de tous les secteurs.
To privatize all the sectors.
Ceci a duré une quinzaine d'années ou une vingtaine d'années.
And that's for 10, 15 years.
Est-ce qu'il ne serait pas indiqué de faire une évaluation de qu'est-ce qui a marché, qu'est-ce qui n'a pas marché pendant la première génération?
It doesn't make sense to monitor and to find out what works or doesn't work for the last 15 years.
De manière à nous baser de cela
and build from there,
pour aller vers...
S'il vous plaît, monsieur. Oui, ça va, Sophie. S'il vous plaît, on n'a pas le temps.
Parce qu'il faut vraiment faire court si vous avez une question, parce qu'on avait dit qu'ils avaient juste 5 minutes.
Ma question, c'est est-ce qu'on ne peut pas faire une évaluation de comment la privatisation a marché jusqu'à maintenant, pour maintenant se projeter vers les objectifs de développement durable.
Okay. That the question here is, it's really important to go from what has been done in the past, from the 10, 15 years, regarding privatization, and build from there and see how to make it better with sustainable development goals.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur, c'est gentil. Merci beaucoup, boss, madame. Oui, ça va, merci beaucoup, bravo. And the last one, is the lady still there? With a pair of glasses? Yes, and that will be the last one. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes.
My name is Witness Suma. I'm a director of High Vision Institute of Special Education from Mombasa. I really like the topic. The lady was just talking about responsibility. It's very sad when women gather down together to collect articles, baskets, and many traditional attires, and they come together in a group and they challenge them to an exporter who export them outside of the country, mainly on business. Now, the issue of responsibility, the women will rely on one person who is going to be responsible on all those items. By the end of the day, the women wait and wait and wait, and by the end of the day, they're not getting their funds back. They have gone down, borrowed the item from different women at the grassroots level, and by the end of the day, they are told money has been channeled to another organization. It's very disappointing when women want to come out together. They're innovated. They want to come up and ensure that they bring their families up. But the corruption is the main thing which disappoints these women down at the ground.
Thank you.
Unless we change the system.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, if we have a whole day, we can be talking on this issue. But because our time is limited, I'm going to ask my panelists to respond just 1 minute each, and then also to include their final remarks. So please, I'll start with Edward. A number of questions have been raised, and some of them were comments. What are your views and your final remarks?
I think, as my sister Phyllis here said, it's a personal responsibility, and that's what it is. Corruption is a disease, and for this disease to be fought, we must be responsible ourselves first, and then hopefully the issue can be solved. So all the comments that I'm listening to you, I think the issue is how can we do this? Let's start with ourselves, let's start with our kids, and hopefully we can solve the problem. It's a personal responsibility.
Yeah, I'll just add to say it's personal responsibility. I must say that it begins with me, and if it begins with me, if I do the right thing, then of course, and I drive the right kind of behavior, then of course we'll be able to fight this particular disease. Just going back to what the lady there talked about in terms of women coming together, making collections and that kind of thing, and the fact that we think that we need to change the systems. I don't think it is the systems. I think it is us in the groups that we are in that we need to, we need to advocate, we need to talk about the right things, and we should also be able to do due diligence on the people that we give our things. And because that person will always be part of that group, and I think that's something we need also to take up. Going back to what the gentleman talked about, frustrations, and I think it's important to talk about frustrations. And I will just come back to myself. It's exactly what us we do. If today you go to public functions, whether in town or in the villages, you are going to see some very young men, 20-year-olds, and just because they have worked in some organization which has allowed them to steal, you are going to see some very respectable men and women there standing up for them and telling them to take seats. So you must ask yourself, what culture are we driving? And I think those are things that we must ask ourselves. We must say, basically it begins with me. The last thing that I must say is this is a disease we must fight. If we don't fight it, then of course all of us, in fact all of us shall perish, and therefore we must really fight. We must fight corruption, beginning with ourselves. We must invest in the tools, we must invest in advocacy, we must invest in systems, and we must invest in people. And I think it begins from home. I think this is a cultural issue. It has nothing to do with an organization. It begins with me. And then lastly, we must collaborate. Next time when Phyllis or Joby is looking for, for a venue, and of course they are not doing business, so she'll be asking for sponsorships. We must ask ourselves, are we ready to sponsor even as individuals? We must begin there, because we must continue to drive advocacy. Unless we have a meeting like this where we shall agree on what we want to do, then of course we shall fail. And we must be asking ourselves those questions. As organizations, what are we doing to drive this? As individuals, what are we doing? And I think we must, first of all, take the first responsibility, even before we seek to collaborate with the rest of the organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just to add on what my fellow panelists have said, I agree that as a society, in many cases, we have celebrated people who have gotten money by means that we know are corrupt. So as individuals, we also must look at ourselves and celebrate the right role models, because this is sending a wrong message to our youth. So we have a lot of people looking for get-rich-quick schemes and opportunities to make money quickly, because those are the role models we celebrate. So I think it also is something that we say about the media. Can the media celebrate the right role models? Can we question where people's sources of wealth are? And if it is not the right way, can we call corruption by its right name? It's simply theft. It's robbing our future generations of great opportunities. It's robbing our economy of money for development. So I think we really need to call it by its right name. Someone spoke about shared economic growth, and I agree that inclusive economic growth is necessary if we are going to be able to achieve the goals we have under the SDGs, if we are going to be able to fight corruption. So we need to look at ensuring growth trickles down to the entire community. About the exploitation, I think let's build capacity. Let's get involved in the right business organizations where we can come together and have our rights fought for, so that if anyone is exploiting us, we deal with that. So my last plea will be, we need to come together. We are pushing for collective action to fight corruption, because no one is going to be able to do it alone. So we appeal to all of us. Let's come together and fight corruption. And at a personal level, let's take personal responsibility to do the right thing. Thanks, Joby.
Thank you very much indeed, panelists. I just want to also mention here that corruption is not only about bribery. We're talking about nepotism, we're talking about embezzlement, and so many others, so that we don't think it's only when we exchange money and all that. On this note, I just want to thank every one of you for being here today to listen to us, and also to my distinguished panelists. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time from your busy schedules to be here today. And of course, Lillian and Judy, who have been assisting me here. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you, Darian, for this opportunity. I also want to appeal to all the companies that are here. If you are based here in Kenya, or you have subsidiaries here, please engage at the local network on the Siemens Initiative project. It is still on for 2 years. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much indeed. We hear that corruption is the #1 obstacle to achieving sustainable development. We hear that collaboration is essential to tackling corruption. This is going to be themes coming through during the day. Thank you very much, panel here. Great. It is now time for a break. Before the break, can I ask you please to do one thing? Could you all, right now, grab one of your business cards? Everyone, find one of your business cards. And I want you to put them together on the table. We are going to collect business cards because we need to know your email addresses, not just who you are. We know who you are, but we need your email addresses to send you information that's coming out of this. So could you now grab a business card from your pocket or from your bag and then put them on a pile on the table, and we will come around and collect them. I have some slightly embarrassing and slightly bad news about the coffee break. Our caterer has not been able to get into the building because of the security, which means that there is not coffee outside, and I feel like a terrible person to have to tell you this. There is water outside, and if you imagine enough, you can imagine that tastes coffee-like or something. I'm so sorry that there will not be coffee. Grab some water, refresh yourselves. We'll be back here starting at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock for the session on business, engaging business as a partner in development. See you in a few minutes, and thanks again to all the people who spoke this morning. We'll be starting again in just a couple of minutes. 2-minute warning.
Oh, is there anybody that can translate here? There's no, we don't have, you know. Oh, madame. Oui, s'il vous plaît. Gentil. S'il vous plaît, il faut faire vite. Hein.
Je vais essayer de faire mon possible.
Voilà, je disais donc que je suis Kemayou Claude.
I'm Kemayou Claude.
Je suis sénateur au Cameroun.
I'm senator from Cameroon.
Et je tenais à remercier
I want to thank
l'Union interparlementaire
the
de s'être pour la
partnership with all stakeholders,
de tous les partenaires au développement,
for the all stakeholders in development,
c'est de savoir,
is to know
comme nous avons connu une première génération de partenariat,
as we have assisted to the first wave of partnership,
qui consistait en privatisation de tous les secteurs.
to privatize all the sectors.
Ceci a duré une quinzaine d'années ou une vingtaine d'années.
And that's for 10, 15 years.
Est-ce qu'il ne serait pas indiqué de faire une évaluation de qu'est-ce qui a marché, qu'est-ce qui n'a pas marché pendant la première génération?
It doesn't make sense to monitor and to find out what works or doesn't work for the last 10, 15
I can ask the
years.
panelists
De
to please
manière
take
à
their
nous baser
seats.
de cela
And
sur,
build from there.
pour aller vers...
S'il vous plaît, monsieur. Oui, ça va, Sophie. S'il vous plaît, on n'a pas le
Parce
temps.
qu'il faut
maintenant.
vraiment faire court si vous avez une question, parce
Oui.
qu'on avait dit qu'ils avaient juste 5 minutes.
Ma question c'est, est-ce qu'on ne peut pas faire
So welcome back, everybody. I hope that you had a good break. I hope that you're now fully caffeinated and ready to go. I am absolutely delighted to welcome a wonderful panel for this next session on engaging business as a partner in development. We have here, starting from the far right, we have Mr. Jeffrey Sakalunda, who's the chair of the Zambian Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry. We have my colleague Paula Kamfors from the Swedish Development the Swedish International Cooperation Agency. No, Swedish SIDA, Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. We have on my right here, we have David Croft from Diageo, and we have my colleague Dave Prescott from the Partnering Initiative. Now, what we've seen in the discussions this morning, but also more generally in international development, is this shift from what were the Millennium Development Goals, quite specific linear targets in development, reducing reducing issues of health problems, increasing the number of people in schools, quite linear targets, We throw money at the problem, we try and solve the problem. We try to reduce these challenges. With the move to the Sustainable Development Goals, we have a fundamental shift here. We are understanding that actually we need to look much more at a systems level. We need to solve the underlying problems, not just try to deliver action on particular targets. And secondly, we know that we have to work, we all have to work together as a society. We need business, we need government, we need civil society working effectively together to drive the economic, social, and environmental development of our countries. Now, business's role in development, in a way, I would say that there are two roles. The first one is as an actor in development, because we know that business doing business is good for development, as long as that business is responsible, inclusive, sustainable. If it is, then business is providing the livelihoods, the jobs, it's efficiently getting goods and services affordably into our shops, it's paying taxes to the exchequer. So business is doing well is good for development. Now, business as a partner in development, I think, is a slightly different consideration to business as an actor in development. And we hear about it a huge amount. You'll hear about it all this week. We need to engage business as a partner in development. Well, what does that actually mean? What does it mean for business to be a partner in development? And David, I'm wondering, just from your perspective, working in a major international, multinational company, Diageo, what does it mean for your company, for business to be a partner in development?
Thanks, Darian. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said there is a difference between business being an actor in development and actually contributing in a more significant way than just by running its business. We heard in the earlier session, business needs to run responsibly, it needs to avoid corruption, it needs to pay its taxes, it needs to contribute in that way. But I think the further development is how business then starts to frame its activities and creates its own growth agenda by thinking about a shared value, a shared growth opportunity. And I've been fortunate to work for 3 or 4 businesses where shared growth has been at the heart of what they do. Now, by that I mean it's about thinking about your contribution in business, but also thinking about how you contribute beyond your factory gate, for example, or your office environment, into that wider social or environmental structure that business exists in. Business doesn't exist in isolation. And if it starts to think more broadly about the indirect and sometimes less tangible impacts it can create, then it starts to contribute to development in a different way. And for me, that's not a significant change. This is not asking business to suddenly do a 90-degree turn in its direction. It's about thinking about creating that shared value approach as it continues to drive its own growth. So let me give you some examples. That might be about making certain that everybody within the business itself and within its supply chain is able to access decent work, thinking about the labor standards that we have within our own business and also then which we support through our suppliers into other aspects of the business. It might secondly be about thinking, how do you create sustainable supply chains that add greater value? And at risk of waxing lyrically about how we work at Diageo with small farmers or how other companies work with small farmers, it's about creating new markets for those people so that that livelihoods improve. Yes, it is about some of the more traditional CSR approach, but it's trying to connect that to your business and using business as an anchor for stronger development. And for me, therefore, Darian, the key thing is, how do you grow your business and grow value outside of your business? That's what the role of business can be in this context.
So it's going well beyond traditional ideas of philanthropy. It's about the joint value that can be created by the way of doing business and the footprint that one has within society. Dave Prescott, you work with the Partnering Initiative, and we did quite a major report, a major study just before the previous high-level meeting of the HLM back in Mexico. And in that report, we asked about 200 or 300 people about what does it mean for business to be a partner in development. I wonder if you could just give us just a little indication of what came back on that. What does that journey look like for business and other actors to become partners for development?
Thanks, Darren. I'm just going to see if this clicker works. Can I have the next slide, please? This diagram, which you might struggle to read, sets out stages of increasing levels of engagement between business and development actors. So on the grey side of the diagram, don't worry about the text. On the grey side of the diagram, it refers to business action, and on the other side of the diagram, it refers to what development actors are doing and need to do to improve the role of business as a partner in development. Sorry, can I have the slide back up, please? It's gone off the screen. So what we have at the top of the diagram is the notion that business and the development community working effectively together is not something that's happening systematically across the world at the moment. We see it happening more and more often, and arguably it's happening more than it was a couple of years ago when we launched the report. But more countries are at the lower levels of that diagram. So the arrows are further apart, the engagement between the two types of entity are further apart. We have government setting development priorities in the countries without consultation with the private sector or with other actors. Or we have business simply getting on with its own bottom line without any consideration of the type of issues that David was was discussing. And then the levels in between, that sort of base level and the top, full integration, we have more dialogue, more attempt to align the interests of business with interests of development. I think I'll have to stop there because the diagram is quite dense, but I can go into more detail later in the discussion.
So basically, it's a progression, greater understanding from development actors, from business, that by aligning their interests together, by working effectively together, they can create joint business and social value is what we're looking for. Jeffrey, you're working in Zambia. To what extent do you find this resonating with companies? Do companies that you work with, do they see it this way? Do they understand the potential for working more strongly with government, with NGOs, in order to get a stronger mutual value, shared value from their operations?
It wouldn't be an outright yes or no. Our experience has shown that yes, companies, first of all, one must acknowledge the purpose of going in business is a rather selfish motive, which is to make profit and make money and grow. But we also recognize that therein lies the symbiotic relationship with the government agenda, political agenda, which is the agenda for jobs, the agenda for tax revenue, and clean environment, and also, quality products. The coming together of government and donors, cooperating partners, and private sector is seen as desirable in most instances. But there is an element of mistrust, and this mistrust comes from what are the objectives of partners coming to the table. So we have acknowledged that it's desirable to develop capacity in terms of these partnerships. And we think that the development of skills in brokering, the relationships between the private sector and the other cooperating partners is essential. We have developed some very enduring partnerships for small-scale, farmers who have come into the value chain for the largest brewer in Zambia, and now developing a new product, a new clear beer, using indigenous crop, which is the cassava. And our experience with that engagement has demonstrated that this is achievable, but we all need to work together to ensure that the participating partners make their motives extremely clear, and that they are coming with an open mind to develop a mutually exciting journey for all.
So some of the elements there, yes, the mistrust between business and government or other actors, and the need to raise awareness and build capability to partners, very useful. And I'll ask you a bit some more later about exactly how that works. And Paula, you are based here in Kenya, and Sweden itself has developed something of a platform for working with Swedish companies. Wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so we have in Sweden in 2013, well, the former Director General of SIDA, which you probably met this morning, who's now the DAC chair, initiated a dialogue, a stakeholder dialogue, together with the Swedish private sector. So what we did was that we invited about 20 Swedish multinational companies operating on a global market, and we invited them to discuss, sustainability. So we sat down together to talk about sustainability and to talk about, what they wanted the new sustainability development goals to entail, and also if there were any areas of possible partnerships for us in between. Basically, to get to know each other better. What are your objectives, your incentives, your mandates, and so forth. So that, was 3 years ago now. So after that meeting, we, which was also on CEO level, which is very important to say as well. This is a CEO network. So after that, we formed this network, Swedish Leadership for Sustainable Development, which has now been running for 3 years. Very much, the process started as kind of like an input to the SDG process, to kind of like involve the Swedish private sector into that dialogue early, before we had the SDGs, adopted. But then, when we had the SDGs adopted in September last year, our network obviously also came into like a new phase, I would say, in our life, going from input and dialogue to more implementation. Because that has been really clear for us from the beginning, I would say, that we wanted to be a network both for dialogue, for knowledge exchange, but also for concrete action. We want to do development together through these PPDPs. So we at SIDA call them PPDPs to emphasize the development perspective.
PPD being? Public-Private Development Partnership. Thank you. Yes, of course, one of the challenges we face is a language challenge. One of the things, in fact, it'd be interesting to get some views from the room in just a moment. One of the challenges that we see is the use of the word public-private partnerships. So when you use that, if you talk to many government people, they immediately think of the formal finance-based mechanisms in which businesses are, in essence, delivering public goods or public services, making an upfront investment and then being paid back over time. That is not the type of collaboration and partnership we're talking about here. We are talking about businesses and governments and others coming together to collectively solve business sustainability or social development challenges. And I think it's important to understand that distinction. Now, earlier we had a lot of governments in the room. Do we still have governments in the room? Put up your hand if you're government. If you're governments, we still have quite a few governments. So what I'd like to hear from you is, we know that responsible, inclusive, sustainable business is good for development. We've heard a little bit about what partnerships, business partnerships, PPDs can be. From your perspective, governments, please, what are you doing to work with business to support responsible, inclusive, sustainable business, or to partner with business in some way towards the SDGs? What are you doing currently to engage with business? And if you can also tell us, what do you see as the obstacles? What are the challenges that you as governments face in working in this way with business?
So, good morning, everybody. My name is Roland. I work with the Swiss government in development cooperation and development, actually. And we work quite a bit with middle-income countries, which is our focus. And there you tend to work with businesses as well. And we use a couple of modalities to work with businesses. First of all, we focus on the enabling environment, as we heard it earlier this morning. We support our partner governments in creating an enabling environment. We do finance corporations, public-private partnerships in a good way, in a sound manner, often through platforms. And we do also capacity building on both sides, mainly also on the government side, on the partner government side, to make things happen. We also do, of course, development financing. We have our own development finance institution where we work with private sector, and so on and so forth. So I think I gave you a few examples, and of course the idea is not to draw a long list. But since I have the microphone, maybe later on I would have a question for our colleague from Diageo. You said, about sustainable supply chains, responsible supply chains. It struck me the other day in Geneva, there was this meeting on human rights and business, like the Rocky Principles and all the rest of it. And business companies said, and of course it was not Diageo, just generally I have a general question, which is, they said, we look for all the good standards. And at the same time, it struck me that they were not, in their supply chains, at the same time it struck me that they were not able or not willing to pay more for their sourcing. So they do competitive sourcing, like lowest bid, and they do ask for the standards. So somebody has to pay for them, for instance. And often in the supply chain, it doesn't quite work out. And of course, the buyer-supply relationships are not symmetric. The buyer tends to have more bargaining power, especially when it comes to commodities. So how do you deal with that challenge? Thank you.
It's a great question. We'll come to it in just a moment. Thank you. Some others. What are the challenges, whether you're government or business or NGOs? What are the challenges that you're seeing to better cooperation and better relationships between governments and businesses and others?
Hello. Good morning, everybody. I'm from the Italian Agency of Development Cooperation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Actually, we are a quite new established agency, and I'm responsible with my colleagues with the public-private sector office. And we established actually a specific working group for having on board all the private sector main partners, depending on the big companies, up to the small companies. Actually, the main challenges there are that if companies, private sector is big enough to go alone, then you have some kind of, problems in getting our, government support. If they are too small, they are not ready enough for going in, in challenging countries, challenging adventure. But at the same time, our idea is to have them on board, to involve private sector when, respecting meeting some criteria, the UN Global Compact criteria, the OSD for multinational companies criteria. So what we are trying to disseminate is starting with, a soft approach, more aimed at reaching out, for example, inclusive business, the social business, and starting from there, because we are a new company, we just started our business in beginning this year, and then going up, in order to get, the international standard, and even to reach even the big companies. But always opening an open dialogue, even, a continued dialogue, meeting them, having them, participating to the workshop in order to understand their needs and to be closer as possible to the business. Thank you.
So clearly this issue of dialogue is hugely important. So we have a lady over there and then another lady over there.
My name is Rita Motegi. Thank you very much, Darius. I am a practicing business person in Kenya. First of all, I need to give a lot of accolades to our government for what they have done that we think has worked and will work in the long term if it's managed properly. and it's probably something that other governments or other third world countries should be able to emulate, because one of the things that I believe in is that quicker development can be and will be achieved if we are able to grow our economies from the point of SMEs. I mean, I would imagine a company like Coca-Cola already employs about 50,000 people. The question that I would have is, what can Coca-Cola do to be able to do another 50,000? I don't believe there is much option. But if we were able to grow our SME sectors, what then that would do is that 50,000 that Coca-Cola cannot be able to uptake will be uptaken from the SME sectors. When it comes to development agencies, there's something that I've found to almost work counter the effort that a lot of development agencies work with. And this is in the way they disburse their help or their development funds. Why I'm saying this is because the platforms that they use are mainly financial platforms. And what the platforms that are currently being used will end up doing, and is why I'm saying it works against the effort.
My last question to you would be how, because when you look at the Senate, because our Constitution, which was amalgamated in year 2010, has the Senate and has the women representative docket. But these two dockets do not have a kitty. So they are always complaining that they have no money allocation for development. But and then when you find the governors and the parliamentarians do have a kitty, but we have such a duplication of roles and a lot of I would say loss of financial management proper. So how do you strengthen the Senate and the women representative docket so that they are effective to create about the required sustainable change that could bring about good development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Alessandro has just reminded me that really we want to, given the limits of time, we want to prioritise questions from parliamentarians. So just for the minute, can only parliamentarians stick their hands up, with apologies to everyone else. So why don't you three kind of come to the front? And yes, and then there's you two, and then there's you guys. I mean, I think we can, if those seven that I've just pointed out, let's say, can you kind of organise yourself such that you come to the front and speak, please? Yep.
Thank you. My name is Bill Okero, Senator from Kenya. Just a quick one on the members of parliament, particularly from the donor countries who are involved in ODA. Is it possible for those members of parliament to engage the members of parliament in the developing countries who are recipients of ODA, so that we get to know really to what extent your country, this ODA is being effectively utilized, because the question is always about effective utilization of this, and we don't, invariably what happens is that your countries don't engage parliaments, it's always they deal with the executive, and so we don't get to know what exactly happens. So is it possible for parliaments to do that? Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm Joseph Mbatndam from Cameroon, and from the CEMAC Parliament. I want to laud, first of all, this initiative that we've been invited to such a forum, because the Central African sub-region is very little represented in many of these fora. And when I looked at the representation of AWEPA around Africa, I discovered that it is virtually absent from the Central African region. Except the CEMAC Parliament, you will see a small dot I want to say that one thing is very central to this sub-region. The committees, the standing committees of the various parliaments meet in closed doors. They are not open to the press and the public. And as a result, a lot of scrutiny that goes behind closed doors is not known to the citizenry. I want to place this to ask, how can we get the various competent committees that examine issues concerning aid and cooperation to open to the public, so that the members could understand what aid is all about? The government gives us the impression that aid is not even necessary, and they go around borrowing money. You would realize that for quite a while, the 6 countries that constitute the Central African region were under the heavily indebted poor countries. We just came out of it, and we're getting down deep into it. What can you be of assistance to us? Thank you very much.
Hello. My name is Wolfgang Birkelhuber. I'm parliamentarian in the Austrian Parliament, and I'm member also from AWEPA. And to my colleague from the CEMAC Parliament, I can tell you that we had meetings also from AWEPA with CEMAC. It is necessary to strengthen this work together. That sure, it is not often enough we can come together. I'm also convinced, but I heard really very interesting contributions today, and I want to focus on one really important issue. I feel my colleague from Zambia, Simfoke, was saying that it could be possible to have hearings as committee. When they are not, let's say, when they are not open to the public, you can really start with public hearings, that you invite media, you invite the stakeholders from the NGOs to strengthen this partnership and to open it for the public. And scrutinizing more openly will strengthen also the confidence in all this ODA and the effectivity of foreign aid or aid policies. In the most of the European parliaments, we have committees on aid or things like that. So it should be implemented in all of your parliaments all over the world. And there is one very important argument for ODA, I feel. It's all the questions we are debating in international level. Climate change, we have growing inequality in our societies and also all over the world. And so we have really to strengthen looking forward, and one of the SDGs is especially focusing on the issue of inequality. And so when we strengthen our work on that, it's a good argument also for our governments, especially for from the donor countries, to say, yes, this is an answer to our problems. This is a real answer, because otherwise we will have more migration, we will have more conflicts in the world, and that will not be the solution. Thank you.
Just in terms of order, can I suggest that we just take the 5 people now standing up and no one else comes, and then, is that okay? And then we'll come from my right to left. Oh yeah, sorry, you can go to the other side. Well, it's okay now. And you're going to have about a minute, right? You're going to have a minute, so think really, really hard what you're going to say. Unless Alessandro tells me that we have more time.
No, we have 10 minutes.
Right, okay.
My name is Rafi Munawar, Member of Parliament from Indonesia. I would like to give a comment and share best practice. But I make Indonesian language and my staff will translate. Selama ini Indonesia telah berperan aktif dalam banyak forum dan terlibat dalam mekanisme global dan dialog tentang efektivitas dana pembangunan di kawasan. Lebih dari itu, Indonesia adalah negara penandatangan Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness. dan negara pengampu The Jakarta Commitment for its Effectiveness pada tahun 2009. Oleh karena itu, tentu saja Indonesia sangat mendukung forum ini serta agenda-agenda yang dicanangkannya. Yang kedua, kami juga telah membaca 2016 Progress Report dari Global Partnership Monitoring yang baru saja hadir ini. Indonesia mengapresiasi Global Partnership sedalam-dalamnya serta turut mendukung agenda Effective Development Cooperation yang telah berkembang demi tercapainya tujuan pembangunan global. Dari perkembangan Effective Development Cooperation yang terlihat dalam laporan tersebut, Indonesia melihat Global Partnership bukan hanya sebuah forum konsultasi, namun juga sebagai forum penggerak tata cara kerjasama pembangunan yang lebih efektif. Yang ketiga, salah satu praktik terbaik dalam hal efektivitas dana pembangunan dan pengawasan parlemen di Indonesia adalah bahwa DPR RI telah mendirikan panitia kerja yang secara khusus menangani tujuan pembangunan berkelanjutan atau SDGs. Panja SDGs dibentuk dengan tujuan untuk membantu perwujudan dan pencapaian seluruh target SDGs dengan meningkatkan kesadaran para anggota parlemen terkait isu-isu, memonitor pencapaian target SDGs, serta memberikan saran serta memperjuangkan anggaran dan legislasi untuk mencapai tujuan-tujuan yang ada di dalam SDGs. Panja juga memiliki peran sebagai gerbang diplomasi parlemen dan vokal point DPR RI dalam berbagai kerjasama internasional mengenai SDGs tersebut. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Honorable Mishi Jumamboko. I'm a member of parliament representing the county of Mombasa, that is in the coast of Kenya. And I have some few questions. My first question is not really a question, but it's just an input. And this is on civil society. I think it is high time that as members of parliament or the parliament in our countries, we need to have a formal structured engagement with the civil society. And I'm saying that because I've seen some scenarios which are not good for our country. Like in Kenya recently, some few months back, there was an uproar through the civil society that the salaries for the members of parliament has to be reduced. And because there's no formal engagement with the civil society, they took some pigs, they brought to the parliament, and even they branded the pigs that the MPs are MPigs. So there was a lot of acrimony, and there was sort of like a chaos erupting between the civil society and the members of parliament. So I feel that there is a degree of enmity between the civil society and the members of parliament. But if we have a proper formal engagement whereby we can share, especially on pertinent issues, then I think such scenarios cannot happen. My second question is also on civil society. We need to capacity build the civil society because most of the time they look on the interests of the public. They can put some petitions to the parliament, and sometimes the petition does not get some intervention because of certain reason. Or maybe the petition is not favorable to the executives, so they don't get petition. And they try to go to the courts, but sometimes they don't have money. So that is also important that they need to have some resources so that they can even take such cases to the courts. The other thing I want to talk about is what measures can we put just to avoid the executive from interfering with the independent bodies. We have independent bodies, they have to do their works independently. But what we are witnessing in so many countries, and especially in Africa, it is that when these independent bodies intervene on certain issues, they make decisions. But you just see that there are some executive directives whereby they just get rid of all the decision which has been made. For instance, in Kenya, we have the PAC committee and we have the PIC committee, which deals on the public accounts and the public investment of the country. But most of the time, the membership is that the government has more members and the opposition has less members. So when it comes to voting, each group is being coerced by their leadership. The opposition, they're being called by their leadership. The government, they're being called by the leadership. And the leadership will just give them the decision which is based on their interest, and sometimes it's not on the interest of the public or the citizens of that country. So it becomes a major problem to the country. And that is an issue which we really need to work as members of parliament, that we need to do something to ensure that any decision we make a decision which are going to be favorable and will be on the interest of the people which we represent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm being generous on time because you're very distinguished people, and I think it's important to hear you, but just to say again, we are running over time.
All the panelists and the distinguished guests, all protocol observed, thank you for granting me this opportunity, being one of the young people, to stand before you. My name is Joshua Kemboi. I represent National Youth Council from Kenya, and I want to thank you so much. One thing I want to say is that in any liberal democratic society, a good parliament should reflect the social diversity of its society. That means we need to have representation of young people, the youth, people with disability, and a society in entirety. But it is paining me from inside. When you look at the panel, it tells you that we've not achieved an effective and significant representation in this world of young people. We are still historically underrepresented. And it is my desire next time we come here, we can have a young person standing before here. Members, in order to achieve effective development cooperation, especially in sub-Saharan African countries, social diversity in representation is essential and imperative. The youth needs to be included in political participation, not only in elections, but also in development and implementation of policies and programs which are affecting us young people. I've heard members speaking here before. They're requesting donors to give them financial support in order to keep the government, maybe to scrutinize the executive in the activities that they're carrying out. My big question is, who is scrutinizing these parliamentarians? As young people, through these organized groups that we have, National Youth Council it was created under the Act of Parliament. We also need some support. In a responsible manner, we are going to keep all legislators in a constant vigil and check, because who is going to exercise that?
Thank you. I think that's...
As I come to conclusion...
Yeah.
As I come to, okay, as I come to conclusion, political instability, especially in Africa, has become an impending or a barrier to developmental integration. Talk about terrorism in Africa. We are asking the UN maybe to come up with some legislation or protective policies on arms embargo. When you talk about Somalia, our neighbors here, it is proliferation of small arms, and terrorism is attracting many young people in our country. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, allow me to paraphrase the words of Sandra Musi, who said, rather than standing or speaking for youth, we need to stand with youth speaking for themselves. We don't need a political movement for youth. We need to build environments and policies for our collective future. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and I'm Mr. Hassan. I'm from delegation of Sudan. I have only one question. So, what the role can be played by AWIBA and IBU to prompt the crediting countries to exempt the loans from developing countries so as to drive sustainable development forward? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks everyone also. Very distinguished people having to queue up. I apologise for that. And I do apologise also that we're running over time. I do think it's important because people have come a very long way, and I think it's important to give them a chance to speak. That means that we are over time, but try and stick to a minute. We've had a lot of questions: corruption, parliamentary processes, international relationships, money allocation. The youth has come up a number of times. Debt issues are rising, relationships with civil society. Can I ask you to try and focus back on the global partnership and aid and development cooperation, given that that is the nature of this meeting?
Okay, very briefly, I go back to the project that the Irish section of UEPA ran with UEPA, funded through Irish Aid, the joint monitoring teams, because it was a real engagement between Irish parliamentarians and parliamentarians from Tanzania and Mozambique. And one of the aspects that we looked at were the EPAs and the effect of EPAs on countries. And I do think we could build on that. Further thing I think is when there are official visits by our governments to African countries and other countries, I think there should be an onus on whoever is visiting, whether it's the minister or whoever, that they meet the parliamentarians and not just their counterpart in government. And I think that again would encourage the conversation as to what's going on. And I just make a brief point. We mentioned the media. Now the media can have both a positive and a negative effect. It can be positive if they are being used to ensure transparency of what's going on at every level. And I think they're vital in exposing and revealing any secret deals or trade agreements that are going on. But we do know also that they can have a negative aspect and they can fuel that agenda. Why bother with ODA?
Thank you. I think a lot of the questions were about process, and a lot of the process questions are about power. We know that secrecy is bad for inclusive development. There's a wonderful phrase, lights on, rats out. And so applying scrutiny is a key function of both parliamentarians and of NGOs. We know as well that the concentration of wealth and power, which is circular, is endangering all of our development gains and warping all of the deals that are being made. And the answer is to try to challenge that concentration of wealth and power. I think there's going to be a need for assertiveness on behalf of all of us, in that we're not going to be invited by executives to do this. And likewise, I don't anticipate a new donor fund in 2017 to enable this to happen. And I was very struck by the young man that said, and I think very validly, you know, why are we not on the panel? But it reminded me of a wonderful line from the civil rights movement, where somebody said, when you're not invited for a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. And I think that quality of assertiveness is what will help to correct the maldevelopment that all of our countries are in danger of experiencing.
That was very clear. I'd like to summarize that some of the issues that was brought up here is the reason for global partnership as such. There are very difficult issues, from corruption to the whole debate around executives. It is actually a place for that here if we really try to get people to join that conversation. And I can't see an arena which can do that better, but we have to be assertive in making that happen because it's so important, and it has to do with trust as well. And it's a possibility to build trust in this arena if we really work hard on that. I also hear that we hold ourselves to account. Civil society is holding parliamentarians to account. I'm asking parliamentarians to hold the donor community to account. I don't think that we mean just pointing fingers. I really think that we mean, you know, an informed conversation around that. Again, let's tick off the issues and put them on the agenda for global partnership. What I can do is also to look into one of the tools that OECD DAC does. We review the donors on their development every 5th year, with a midterm review in between. And I don't know, because I'm new, but I will find out how we address the role of parliamentarian in that. Because there are procedures and processes that we are talking about. There are measures of, could we encourage the exchange that some of you raised by just asking the right questions when we review? We need to take an approach of the SDG, a whole of government, but perhaps also around the stakeholder model and the parliamentarian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right away, I want to thank the gentleman from ActionAid for your comments on Zambia. They're very accurate. And I also want to thank you for the work that ActionAid is doing in Zambia, raising issues of corruption, using issues of tax evasion by multinationals. And I think that that's really helping us as members of parliament to shine a light on these issues as we strive to increase the revenue generation of government. My comment is on the issue of corruption. It goes to the concern by my sister there that how do we vet deals and so on. I think that for Parliament, I think what's important is that resources should not be highly top-heavy. I think decentralizing planning and spending of resources is one of the key steps to minimizing corruption. When funds are disbursed from a central part, a capital of a country, to purchase items down in the constituency, the recipients don't know the process, how it started, and how much was it? Was this value for money? They don't know. They just receive new vehicles in the constituency or at the clinic. But if they knew how much it was budgeted for, they would say, how did you buy one ambulance with so much money? So I think decentralization is one of the things we can do as parliamentarians. Push for legislation of decentralization. Again, I repeat, we must legislate. We should not depend on the goodwill of the executive. It must be in the laws that the nation's resources should be decentralized to much lower levels so that the resources are planned for and spent at lower levels. Because corruption there will be more difficult. And in relation to that, public service. The civil service in some countries, including mine, are literally holding everyone at ransom. And this is where sometimes 70 to 80% of the national revenue is spent on the public service and leaving 20% for the rest of everybody else. And I think that here it's important to tighten measures on financial accountability. Most laws, like the Public Finance Acts of most countries, including my country, Zambia, are weak. They're toothless. When an officer misuses resources, the resources they have spent is converted maybe to a loan. They deduct from his salary. They should be punished. So, but because the law is weak, so there's need to strengthen public finance legislation so that these resources, when they are misused by the officers, and mostly it's a public service. We, the politicians, take the bad name, but we don't manage resources. We set priorities. So the civil service needs to be held accountable, and they should be punished if they misuse public resources, because that's how we can defeat corruption.
Thank you.
I'll try to share only one point. We appreciate the role of the civil societies in respect of their investment for promotion of education, healthcare, etc., etc. Sometimes in our part of the globe we find it's tragic for us. The terrorist organizations are being funded by some civil society organization, both national and international. So we must design a mechanism to distinguish between political considerations. In our close-door neighbor is Myanmar, Burma. The Rohingya minorities are living in that country for 200 to 300 years, but they don't have any citizenship. They don't have any job. They don't have any business. Now they are jumping in the ocean. No way out. So if you go to save them, people will say, oh, this is out of political or religious things. So this is one part. Another part, you see, in the name of helping, taking the advantage of miseries of the people, religion is used. Religion is used. And they are becoming terrorists. And how to monitor this? We must develop a mechanism. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being so brief, panellists, at the end there. I need to call the meeting to an end. We've already run over. Thank you very much, everyone who's contributed and everyone who's been watching. I found that really, really interesting, and I think it demonstrates the importance of being able to sit down and talk about these issues. So I believe now, well, if you're going to say something, but just one final round of applause for the panellists. Thank you.
So, service announcement. We will have lunch in the amphitheater, and on the way there, we will accompany you as a group. There will be a group photo, so we're going to be asked to stand outside the building on the steps. We'll take a group photo, and then we'll proceed for lunch. And I apologize, we're running late, so we're going to try to have lunch a little bit abbreviated. It's going to be a buffet, so you can get your own food instead of waiting for service. And we'll aim to be back here at 2 o'clock. Okay, so let's go as a group. Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Because you're right, politicians take the rap. You're all the corrupt ones. Actually, you know, you're not managing the money in general. Sometimes maybe the top ones do manage some money. Depends on there's some people with jobs that can manage big money. But most parliamentarians are not involved in managing. That's right.
Thank you, so great. We'll see you for then.
Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah.